Welcome to 5 Good Questions. I'm your host, Jake Taylor. Our guest today is Joshua Miller. Josh is a master certified executive coach and a leader in the personal and professional development field. His career experience spans both advertising and the world of organizational development. In advertising, he was responsible for the campaign strategy for Fortune 100 brands. Today, he's supporting executive development and change management for many of the same companies. Today we're going to be discussing his book, I Call Bullsh, Live Your Life, Not Someone Else's. Let's ask Josh 5 good questions. But first, I'm happy to announce my literary debut, The Rebel Allocator, is now available on Amazon in both print and digital formats. You could say it's about time. I've been pouring my heart into this book for more than 3 years. A well-known SoCal billionaire received an early copy of the book and actually called me to say he enjoyed the story and was adamant that I get it made into a movie. Talk about a surreal experience getting 20 minutes on the phone with one of my heroes. My friend Tobias Carlisle had this to say: Jacob Taylor has written a modern-day investment classic. The Rebel Allocator is reminiscences of a stock operator for value investors. It's a fictionalized retelling of the lessons in The Intelligent Investor in an accessible page-turner. If you want to learn how to invest like Warren Buffett by sitting at his knee, this is the book for you. Wow, how flattering is that? I was blown away when he sent me that. I've created dozens of ad-free author interviews over the last 5 years and never asked for anything in return. If you've gotten any value out of these efforts, please do me a personal favor and pick up a copy of The Rebel Allocator. I promise you won't regret it. And now, on with the show. All right, welcome back to the program, everybody. My guest today is Joshua Miller, and he's the Amazon best-selling author of I Call BS, although it's spelled out, and Live Your Life and Not Someone Else's, and which I absolutely love that as an idea. It's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, following your own inner scorecard, as Buffett likes to call it. And I think it's like one of the coolest things that we think about these days is really how do you be true to yourself, and so I love the book for nothing else than it was super authentic.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Jake, for having me here. I'm super excited to be here and to go a couple of 5 questions or so with you.
Well, I only have 5, so hopefully they're good. So question number 1 is, you carry around a fortune cookie with you, and it has a special significance to you. Can you tell us what that is, the story behind it, and what that is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, my father used to always tell me, you'll never know what you can do until you try. And I used to, when I was younger, I thought that, okay, that sounds great. It's very aspirational. Thanks, Dad. But as I got older, I started to understand a little bit more about what he actually meant. When my father got sick with terminal cancer, one of the last things he said to me before he passed away was, just remember that anything is possible as long as you try. But his exact words were, in my entire life, was, you'll never know what you can do until you try, Josh, so never give up. The day after my father passed away, I was having Chinese food, and I opened up that fortune cookie, and it said, you will never know what you can do until you try. That was in 1996, and I have held that fortune cookie in my wallet since 1996. And there has been pivotal times throughout my life where I just was doubting myself, or I was unsure, and lo and behold, I would literally see that phrase or that quote somewhere. So you will never know what you can do until you try is a fortune cookie that I have. I actually had it laminated about 4 years ago so it wouldn't fade away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's and it's in my wallet, and it's just a piece of my father, who I also dedicated my book to, and I love. And so I love that question because, a lot of the times you get fortune cookies nowadays, they're basically advertisements. And this was back in the day when it was, there wasn't anything other than just the message. And the message was really clear to me. And it came at such an opportune time. So I don't believe in coincidences. I just believe that, it's a message that I hold dear to my heart.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible. Just what are the odds that those things would happen so close together? Have you tried, did you play the lotto numbers that were on the back of it?
They didn't have lotto numbers. Maybe I'm aging myself. There were no lotto numbers. There were no lottery numbers. There was no phonetic spelling of any language. It was, here is your message. Take it if you want it, or throw it away. And I've held on to it. So yeah, it is literally something that means the world to me. So
That sounds like something that might be tattoo worthy at some point, maybe.
I thought
If
about
you,
it.
yeah.
I did think about it, but then I went to BuzzFeed once and I saw a bunch of really bad tattoo memes, and I realized, yeah, I'm good with just keeping it in my wallet. It doesn't have to be on my arm.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
exactly. So, question number 2, what does it mean to you to live an authentic and happy life? Because you've obviously thought a lot about this.
Well, I think the first challenge is that there's a huge misconception with what authenticity means. A lot of people have diluted the term authenticity, I think, to mean different things. And so in the corporate world, what happens is we want authentic leaders, right? But as soon as somebody is acting quote unquote authentic, and I'm deeming authenticity as true to themselves, it doesn't work within the culture or the construct of their company. Well, now they're not being authentic leaders. And you could argue, well, no, I am being authentic. I'm being myself. So really, it's about being yourself, being true to yourself, not necessarily being true to someone else's definition. For me, excuse me, authenticity is about making sure I take care of myself, number one. Number two is take care of my family. And then number three is take care of others. And so when I'm leading my most authentic self or my authentic life, I take care of my mind, body, and spirit. I believe that if you can't carry for yourself, there's no way you can take care of the people around you. It's just not sustainable. And then the second thing is providing for my family. And then the third is taking care of my clients and my business and my practice. That is the order in which I've always been able to be successful. When I deviate from that, it's just a matter of time before one of those three pillars fails or falls. And another huge part of authenticity for me and how I've managed to live an authentic life is to not compare myself to other people. That is probably one of the biggest downfalls for people all across, wherever you live. And social media doesn't help. So whenever I talk about authenticity, the first place I look at, is imposter syndrome. And really having people recognize that if you want to be your authentic self, first stop comparing yourself to other people so you can figure out who you really are. What makes you tick? What makes you happy, right? And after 20 years of working with a coach and being a coach, I've learned very clearly that for me, it starts with taking care of myself. So then I can show up for my family and, friends, and then take care of my business. My business will be there. My family will hopefully be there, but I have to be able to show up for them. And I think a lot of people think that being selfless is a noble, badge of honor. And it can be, for sure. But if it's coming from the right place, meaning coming from your heart and not your head, then I would assume or hope that people would understand being selfless is fine, but be selfish first. Take care of yourself first. So
I've heard that before described as if you have to fill up your own cup before it can overflow into others.
It's very true, right? And there's also kind of the oxygen mask, analogy, and all those things, as contrary as they are, they are really important. I think that we've become a society at times where people are so afraid to be I don't want to say self-absorbed, but take time for yourself. It's just so important. I mean, you run many different things. I know you're a very busy man, and you have a full life, and you have a family, and so you have to manage that, right, with intentionality. And from that is being authentic to who you are and what's important to you.
Yeah. So question number 3, and this dovetails nicely, is that how do we separate out what we intrinsically want versus kind of what society tells us that we're supposed to want?
Well, so to me, it's like what you need and what you want, right? And what I'll typically do, and I'll do this with my clients, is I'll have them take out a sheet of paper. And for some people, that's a 8.5 by 11 white piece of thing. Some people forgot. And literally write down on one side of the sheet of paper, what are the things that you need, right? What are the non-essential, if you could take 5 things on a long trip, what are those 5 things, right? These are the non-negotiables. Then what are the wants, right? The aspirational desires. And the reason I say that on a sheet of paper is I'm a big believer of taking a pen and paper and writing things out before jumping onto computers. And I think that when you visually do that, you start to see the discrepancy between what are the things that you actually need, right? I'm not talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just in general. Like for me, I know that I need connectivity. I need to see my family and friends. That's really important to me. I need to be inspired. Like I need inspiration, and that can come in a lot of forms. I need creativity. There's different things, right? So for me, I would say that understanding that if you could only take, and I say this, 5 things with you on a trip, what would those be, right? Start there and have fun with it, because there's a lot of things that we've cluttered our lives up with that we just simply don't need. And it really actually probably weighs us down more than anything.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of addition through subtraction that all of us could get if we worked on it.
Yeah.
So question number 4, and this is actually very kind of a personal question for me, because I feel like the older that I get, a little bit more, the faster that when I feel like I'm in a groove, it starts to become to feel like a rut. And I don't know if that's something that's just with age, or, you've just been grooving for long enough where it's like you just kind of start to feel worn down sometimes. So how do we keep our grooves in life from becoming ruts?
Well, I'll speak to what I do is I have a really great support system, a great network of people that will not enable me, but will hold me accountable. And the accountability looks like checking in and saying, hey, are you okay? Hey, are you where you're supposed to be? Hey, come up for air, right? Because when you get into those grooves, you can go 30,000 feet below sea level and you forget that you're about to run out of air. And then all of a sudden, someone's tugging on the line. You're like, oh, crap, I got to get up there. And I've experienced that, and I'm sure at some point you have. And so the key is to moderate, right? How do you know when you need to come up for air? I think about swimmers. They regulate their breathing so that they can take a couple of strokes, come up for air, take a couple of strokes, come up for air. So it's the same kind of rhythm and cadence I apply to when I'm taking on a project or some sort of initiative. I'm already in the planning stage from a timing perspective. When can I build in a block of time where I come up for air? And that's kind of how I call it. I think it's really important. Also, it's important to mix things up. I mean, constantly change things. I started doing this thing last month where every other day I'm a lefty, and every other day I decided to just use my right hand. Just to do things differently, to see how my brain would react and how I would challenge myself. So I always offer that and invite people to, challenge yourself. Don't get complacent. And the moment you think you're complacent, you probably are. The moment you have that thought of, I feel like I've done this before, change it up.
Yeah.
Change it up.
By the time that it's in your consciousness, you're probably, well into complacency at that point, right?
For sure. And I really do believe that complacency is the root of resignation. It's one stop away. As soon as you're complacent, there's a denial, and then there's resignation, and then you wind up just kind of coasting. You just kind of like show up in life, but you're more of a spectator. And I know, because I did that for many years, and it's really not fulfilling. So I encourage people to come up for air, block out time, get an accountability partner or system in place that's going to check in on you, and don't be afraid to make a left turn when you're supposed to make a right, and just embrace it and see what happens.
So question number 5, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one small problem that you see tripping people up, especially like the people that you work with, coaching, what would it be?
Without question, self-doubt. Self-doubt, it permeates, it metastasizes, and it preys on our insecurities. And I see people all the time come up with brilliant ideas, passionate, aspirational ideas. And as soon as they take a breath, there's the but, or the either or whatever the oppositional statement is. And that's when they start to talk themselves out of it, or they have their friends talk themselves out of it. And I've seen so much of that over my life. And as a coach, I see it all the time. So I thought, when I read that question, thinking like, okay, what if you could wave a wand and there would be no self-doubt? What would that look like? that means every time you said you wanted to accomplish something, you could. Now imagine if we lived in a world where everyone was able to accomplish everything that they set their minds on. I'd probably be out of business, of course, but it'd be
Happily,
fun.
though, probably, yeah.
Happily, but it'd be amazing to watch people. We we grow up in these cultures where it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? When I grow up, I want to be this, I want to be that, and sometimes it's a little antiquated, sometimes it's cute, but what if you could just snap your fingers and say, hey, look, you know what? I wish I could do this, or I could be here, and that was possible. Not that you would immediately be there, but the doubt would go suppressed, and you could just focus on how do I make it happen. I think that would be beautiful for so many people. It would be just like giving such a beautiful gift.
So if you had like one or two kind of tips for conquering self-doubt, what might they be?
The first one is there's something that you really want in your life. And I'm not going to give some over-the-top aspirational quote. Again, take out a sheet of paper. You'll notice a theme with me. And on one side of the paper, make a list. Say, what are the pros of taking action? And then on the other side, what are the cons? And that list will ultimately tell you exactly what you should do. Because 9 out of 10 times, we set ourselves up in our heads, self-defeating wise. We think that the impact of not doing it, we could deal with. But in reality, it's like when you start to look at what we've set up in our minds, you can actually take some action and probably get closer or achieve what you want. It's just we're so insecure and we're so comfortable and complacent. And we forget that on the other side of our comfort zone and so on and so forth is where the breakthroughs are going to happen. So the thing I would tell people is to get clarity. And the way you get clarity is you create a list and you've got what's possible by doing something. Then after the pros and cons, I would also create a list of what is the impact of doing nothing. This is a different type of list.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're not, no action or no choice is still a choice. And people forget that, right? We always tell people either it's yes or no. But being indifferent or ambivalent is also a choice. It's the most disempowering. So write down what are the impacts or what I call the costs.
Yeah, opportunity cost, really.
Yeah. Because when you start to see, oh my God, if I don't talk to Jake today, that could impact X, Y, and Z. Well, wait a second, I can't afford X, Y, and Z. So I need to do whatever I need to do. And sometimes that's the thing that will motivate people to actually take action. Because that's all it comes down to is what is you could argue it's the carrot, it's the stick, right? But what is it going to take to get people off their butt and into action? So, yeah.
Yeah, and probably more people are maybe loss avoiding than they are necessarily gain seeking. And so if you can highlight the costs and that's something for them to avoid, it's easier for them to use that as the stick instead of necessarily focusing on the carrot of how do they get, what they want.
I agree. But here, I'll go one step further. This is something that people don't readily do. They'll do the list, but they won't share it with anybody. Mm. This is the $1 million question, right? Are you willing to share that list with somebody? Because now you've created an accountability partner. You've opened up, you're vulnerable. You're saying, hey, Jake, here's this thing I'm working on or I want to do. I'm nervous, but I created this list. Can you help me? Because now it no longer lives inside of you. It's living outside of you. So I'm a big proponent in sharing what you're working on with the right people so that they can enable and support you in a positive way.
So that's I think a perfect transition for you have a special offer that you're willing to do for the audience here, which is super cool. And no one else has really done anything like this that we've ever talked to. So what do you have for them?
Well, I have something that I'm really, really excited about. So for all of your listeners out there, if you are interested or ever been curious to work with a coach, but couldn't afford it, didn't have the time, wasn't really sure, what I'm offering is the opportunity to have a 1-hour, one-on-one, complimentary, in confidence coaching session with me. We will work on whatever action items or ever goals that you want to work on. I do this because I recognize that everyone could, in fact, benefit from having a coach, but may not be able to afford it or it's the right opportunity. So all you have to do is go to the link that will be in the notes and sign up, register, and I'm going to randomly pick one winner, possibly two, in the next week or so. after listening to this, and then I will contact you and we'll set up that call. And I look forward to it.
Awesome. And so the last question we always ask everybody is
Yeah.
for a book recommendation. And
Yeah.
And true to your your authenticity, and what do you have for us today? I already know the answer, so I don't want to spoil it though.
Well, I don't know. I changed my answer. I'm not sure if you read the new one.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
lay it
So
on me, yeah.
I was going to be bold, and I was going to say that my book is the book I'd recommend. Not from a place, excuse me, of arrogance, but a place of supreme passion. Because a lot of people look at my book and they say, oh, it's a self-help book. And I push back on that all the time and say, it's not a self-help book. It's a self-respect book. And there's a big difference in that. As a coach, I don't believe that people need help. I believe that people just need to respect themselves and their relationship to others as well as themselves more. And that was the tone in which I wrote my book. However, there is one book, Jake, that has profoundly impacted my life, and that's The Alchemist.
Great suggestion.
It is a book that you must read more than once and from cover to back to really absorb the life lessons that it teaches you. And for people that may say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure, I encourage everybody to read that book because I've learned more about my life, and I read it periodically. I go back to it all the time, and I recognize how far I've come. So for anyone who thinks that, life is insurmountable or they may not be able to achieve what they want, I encourage them to read that book and then really think about how far they've probably come already in their lives.
That's a great recommendation. I mean, there are a couple books that, to me, they're a different book every time I read them because of where I am in my life and the things that are important to me. And The Alchemist is one of them. I would say probably the other one that's gotten me that way has been Think and Grow Rich.
That's a good one.
It's just like, it's a different book every time I read it. And I'm like, how the hell does that's to me, the sign of a true like masterpiece of literature.
It is. I mean, it's like a great movie that you never get bored watching because you keep relating to it from a different point in your life. Excuse me. The Four Agreements is another book that I go back and I read at least once a year. Because for me, it's a way to kind of check in on how am I showing up in my life, right? It's easy to point fingers at other people or blame situations and circumstances. But when you have to look at yourself and take accountability and responsibility, these 4 questions it's not rocket science. It's just poignant and powerful. And so that's another book that I would highly recommend.
Well, that's great. Josh, thanks for coming on the program. And I encourage everybody to check out your book, and especially if they're looking for more self-respect and living a more authentic life.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure. Before you go, do me the huge honor of picking up your copy of The Rebel Allocator, available on Amazon in both print and digital formats. It's a business person's guide to effective capital allocation, told in a coming-of-age story of a college grad who crosses paths with a wealthy Midwesterner. It's fiction for the nonfiction reader. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. If you'd like to support this author and purchase their book, click here. If you'd like to become a subscriber to 5GQ, click here. And I included a couple other interviews that you might appreciate right here. Thanks. Happy reading.